Hello everyone, this is your tutor AB and today we'll be learning how to solve quadratics by completing the square. We'll be solving 4 different questions of increasing difficulty and hopefully by the end of the video you will understand how to complete the square and how to approach different situations and different quadratics. Let's get into it. Let's now take a look at this first question. How do we solve this quadratic by completing the square? First, let's rewrite this quadratic. X squared minus 6x, and let's subtract negative 8 from both sides. This gives us x squared minus 6x is equal to negative 8. I simply just brought the 8 to the other side of the equal to sign. So to complete the square, we need to add a number on both sides of the equation such that I get a perfect trinomial, a perfect squared trinomial. So what is this number that I can add on both sides that will give me a perfect square trinomial? To do so, I need to divide this negative 6 by 2 and then square it. That will give me the number needed. So negative 6 divided by 2 is equal to negative 3. Negative 3 whole square gives me 9. And so 9 is the number that I need to add on both sides of the equation in order to get a perfect square trinomial. So when I do so, I get x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to negative 8 plus 9, 1. So this is how my quadratic looks so far. Note that the LHS needs to be factored, the left hand side, but it is a perfect square trinomial. So how do I factor this? Well, it looks simply just like this. X plus 3 into x plus 3, doesn't it? So when I multiply that out, I will get this original quadratic. So x plus 3 into x plus 3. That can just simply be rewritten as x plus 3 whole square is equal to 1. And now it's straightforward. We just need to solve for x. So x plus 3 is equal to, bring the square to the other side of the equation, so I get the square root of 1, which we know is just 1. But note how it is plus or minus. Whenever you have a square root, it is always plus or minus 1 in this case. So x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 1. So x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 1. So x can be equal to negative 4 or x can be equal to negative 2. And that is our two answers. Let's now take a look at the second question. 2x squared minus 3x is equal to 7. How can we solve this quadratic by completing the square? Well, the first step has already been done for us. The 7, which is the c, the constant, has been moved to the other side of the equals to. So we can skip that step. There's a difference between this question and the other question. This is that there is a coefficient attached to the quadratic term, whereas this was not there before. So before completing the square, we need to factor this coefficient out of the quadratic. So we need to divide 2x squared minus 3x by 2, the whole thing. So 2 by x squared minus 3x by 2 plus something is equal to 7 plus something. Note, we need to add a number on both sides such that we get a perfect square trinomial, just like before. And the steps to do that remains the same. We need to divide negative 3 over 2 by 2, and this gives us negative 3 over 4. And then we square this number to give us the number that needs to be added on both sides. So negative 3 over 4 squared gives me 9 over 16. And so 9 over 16 is the number that needs to be added on both sides. But no, before I can add 9 over 16 to the RHS, the right hand side, I need to remember that there is a coefficient. There is a 2 that is multiplied into the whole left hand side. And so I need to multiply 2 into 9 over 16 before I can add that to the other side. So 2 into 9 over 16 gives me 18 over 16 or 9 over 8. I had to multiply 2 into 9 over 16, and that number is what gets added on the other side. And this is all because there was a bracket on the other side, which is all getting multiplied by some number. So now that I've done that, let's rewrite this. So 2 into x squared minus 3x by 2 plus 9 over 16 is equal to, and we need a common denominator, so 7 multiplied into 8 plus 9 over 8 by 8. So what does this give us? We get 2 multiplied into our quadratic, which is x squared minus 3x by 2 plus 9 over 16 is equal to 56 plus 9 over 8. So before we simplify, we need to first factor the left hand side. And we know that this is a perfect square trinomial. So what two numbers added together can give me negative 3 over 2, but multiplied together give me 9 over 16. The number that gives me this is negative 3 over 4. So negative 3 over 4 whole square is equal to 65 over 8. So now we just simply need to solve for x. So let's do so. Let's divide both sides of the equation by 2. X minus 3 over 4 whole square is equal to 65 by 8 multiplied into 1 over 2. And then we can write this as x minus 3 over 4 is equal to 65 over 16 the root of plus or minus. And further we can write this as x is equal to 3 over 4 plus or minus the root of 65 over 16. And further simplified, this can be written as x is equal to 3 plus or minus the root of 65 all over 4. And that is our final answer. Let's take a look at this third question, again having a leading coefficient in the quadratic term. So how do we complete this question? By completing the square. So same steps as before. We need to bring negative 7 to the other side of the equation. So let's rewrite this. Negative 2x squared plus 10x is equal to 7. We just added 7 to both sides of the equation. So note how there is a negative 2 attached to the quadratic term. This is the same step as before. We need to factor this negative 2 out. And so it needs to be divided by the whole LHS, the left hand side. So negative 2 x squared minus 5 plus some number is equal to 7 plus some number. This some number again has to give us a perfect trinomial, perfect square trinomial, and so that is what we will be finding out now. So same as before, we need to divide negative 5 divided by 2, which gives us negative 5 over 2. We'll leave it as that. and then square this number to give us 25 over 4. So 25 over 4 is the number that we need to add on both sides. But before we can add 25 over 4 to the other side, we need to remember that negative 2 needs to be multiplied into the whole bracket. And so, before we add it, let's first multiply negative 2 into 25 by 4. So 25 by 4 multiplied into negative 2. And that's what's going to be added to the other side of the equation. So when we rewrite this, we say negative 2 multiplied into x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4 is equal to 7 plus negative 50 over 4, or we can simply say negative 25 over 2. So negative 25 over 2. Well, let's just simplify. So now on the left hand side, we should have a perfect square trinomial. What two numbers multiply to give me 25 over 4 but add together to give me negative 5? Well, that number is actually 5 over 2. 5 over 2 into 5 over 2 gives me 25 over 4. Add them together gives me 5. So this is what gives me on the left hand side. And let's get a common denominator on the right hand side. So 7 multiplied into 2 minus 25 all over 2. This gives me negative 2 multiplied into x minus 5 over 2 whole square is equal to 14 minus 25 over 2. And so we need to simply just solve for x. Negative 2 multiplied into x minus 5 over 2 whole square is equal to 14 minus 25 is simply just negative 25 plus 14, and so the answer is 611. So negative 11 over 2. So let's solve. So we can say x minus 5 over 2 whole square is equal to negative 11 over 2 multiplied into negative 1 over 2, and solve for x. X minus 5 over 2 whole square is equal to 11 over 2 because the negatives 11 over 4, sorry, because the negatives cancel out, and simply we just bring the square to the other side and we solve for x again. So let's work from this way. So we get x minus 5 over 2 is equal to plus or minus the root of 11 over 4. And let's bring 5 over 2 to the other side. X is equal to 5 over 2 plus or minus the root of 11 over 4. And this again can be written in an even simpler way by saying 5 plus or minus the root of 11 all over 2. And that's your final answer. Let's now take a look at one final completing the square question. So 6x squared plus 36x minus 2. What is the first step? We need to bring negative 2 to the other side of the equation. So let's make this 6x squared plus 36x is equal to 2. And now we remember that whenever there is a coefficient attached to the quadratic term, we need to factor it out of the whole quadratic. So 6 can be factored out because it is a common between 6x squared and 36. So 6x squared plus 6 plus something is equal to 2 plus something. Now this something has to be added on both sides to give us a perfect square trinomial. So same steps as before, we need to divide 6 by 2, and then this gives us 3, and we need to square 3, and that gives us, well, it gives us 9. So we need to add 9 on both sides. But before we add 9 on both sides, again, we have a number in front of the brackets. It needs to be multiplied into the whole bracket. And therefore, before we add 9 on the other side, it needs to be multiplied into 6. So 6 into 9 is 54. So instead of adding 9 to the other side, we add 54 to the other side because there is a bracket we need to remember. So, and this only applies for when there's a leading coefficient. So let's rewrite this. 6x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to 2 plus 54 is 56. So now we have a perfect square trinomial on the left side, and we know that simply this just can be written as x plus 3 whole square is equal to 56. So all we have to do is solve for x. So let's rearrange. X plus 3 whole square is equal to 56 by 6. And then let's solve. So let's bring the square to the other side to make it a square root. So x plus 3 is equal to the square root plus or minus of 56 over 6. And x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 56 over 6. And that is our final answer.